Well, hello again, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. We are going to talk about a topic that is really becoming more important as we have an ongoing housing shortage, and that is new housing. Many people, you may get frustrated with trying to find a used house. You're getting outbid, whatever. Well, one option, build a new house. And so that's becoming a reality for some folks. Maybe it's outside your budget right now. But if you are one of those that is looking to build, looking to find a builder, today's going to be of real interest to you because I got some tips on how to find a builder, how to know one's right for you. Believe it or not, I think there is a match between maybe what a builder produces, how they do it, and what works with you. Obviously, budget has a lot to do with it, and we're going to get into that. But we're going to quickly roll through a few points on what makes it the right builder for you. So number one, with anything, you need to plan. A plan it's critical to everything, but especially for building a house. I can speak from personal experience. About 20 years ago, we decided to sell our home, and we thought we could build closer to where I worked at the time before I got into home inspecting. And so we put our house on the market thinking, maybe we have 3-6 months to sell the house. Back 20 years ago, that's a lot of times what it took. We're not in a seller's market like we are now, or we weren't back then. So anyways, we put it on the market and it sold in 6 days. And so we had a mad scramble to plan, to try to get a rough idea of, one, where the property was going to be that we were going to build the house on. 2, who was going to build it. 3, what's it going to look like? And how are you going to find those plans? We're going to hire an architect. We're going to do it ourselves, and so forth. Planning is critical. Now, I'm happy with my house. We're still in it. A little side note, I decided to build it. So we got a construction loan, and I did most of it myself with some help from family. But there are many things as we've moved in over the years, we've thought, you know what? I wish we'd have done this, or I wish we would have done that, or how come we don't have this, and so forth. And so planning is critical to getting this house done correctly. This is not a process that you want to be frustrated with at the end and wish you never would have did it. Okay? So some key points are hammer out your plan. Find the builder. We'll get into a few more points of what to look for on a builder, but hammer out the plan first. And I'm talking details. You want to know where every outlet's going to go. You want to know that we're going to have every outlet outside where it's going to go. Outside faucets. Where are you going to locate those? Where are you going to need them? Where's your landscaping going to be in relation to that? So all the details are important. Get that all drawn out. The best advice I can give you is just don't rush through that process. And that's going to go a long way toward helping you have a fun experience in this process of building a home. So number one, plan. Number two, budget more than you expect. The kind of the golden rule back 20 years ago, and it's probably even more so now, is get your budget and then add 10% more and then add 10% more. And that's probably what it'll about turn out to, because you don't think of a lot of the little things. Think of all the outdoor amenities that you may add. Do you do something special with your driveway? Do you add a patio? Do you do landscaping that, above and beyond what maybe the contractor typically would add? What about grading and drainage? Is that going to take anything special or extra to get you to where you need to be? So all those little things add up. And a lot of times a builder is going to come in with a bid based on contractor grade materials. Are you prepared to go with that, or do you want better windows? Do you want better appliances? Do you want better floor finishes, countertop finishes? What kind of painting is there going to be? Are you going to have texturing? All those little things add up in price. And so you want to make sure that you're going to budget and that you are willing and able to go beyond that budget. It sounds stupid to say make a budget and then go above it, but that's just kind of one of the things that happens with building projects is you're going to go above your budget. You just are. So there's things you don't expect. Back to my own personal experience, that's exactly what happened. We had set a certain budget and we ended up going about 20 to 25% over that budget, and that's including with me doing a lot of the work. So it just happens. There's things you don't think about, or as you get going, you get the emotion involved and you want some better finishes or whatever, but you want to prepare for that ahead of time. And to my first point, pick the right builder. Well, how are you going to pick the right builder? Well, like anything, what if you hire somebody? What are you going to do? You're going to interview them, right? And so when you pick a builder, I would suggest interviewing them. Check their credentials. What's their experience? Can you look at some of their houses they've already built? Look online, especially now, the reviews, any complaints they've had. And if they have a complaint, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad builder. How did they resolve that? Do they respond to complaints? Because, as a home inspector, we will inspect new houses, and, there's so many things. When you buy a new house, you have that expectation level that this thing is going to be pristine and perfect. And that's not unrealistic to have a pristine house. Perfection is kind of a relative term, I think, in that you're dealing with humans, and they may do a great job. Maybe it doesn't match your standard. And so that's why you want to go in when you're picking this builder, and you want to find one that meets your standard, or at least they try very hard. All right. Remember, builders are not going to do, like, if you talk to a certain builder, he's not going to always do everything himself. They're going to sub it out. They have subcontractors that they rely on. And so you want to check them out too. Are these reliable subcontractors? Do they come and go? Do they have to rehire them a lot, and so forth? So check into their credentials, their references, what people are saying about them. Check out their past work. Walk through some houses they've built already. Take special attention to maybe the cosmetic parts of it. Cosmetic is it's not that critical to the structure of a house, but it does go to detail. How detailed are they? How careful are they? What's the quality of their subcontractors? Finished carpentry is a lot different than structural, building, framing. And so you want to check the framing out. For that, you're probably going to need to bring in an outside source, maybe a home inspector, to check, their past work, just to see if things are going, or if they're building like they should. Are they taking shortcuts? Are they using cheap lumber? Are they using substandard materials to try to save a buck? And so you don't want that. Now, if you're on a lower end budget and you just simply can't afford anymore, that's just something you have to consider as you go forward, if that's going to be right for you. So, and then style. Do you like how their houses look? When you buy this house, you want to enjoy it. You want to love it. When you build a house, you're having some input into this, and you want to move into that thing, and this is going to be your castle. So you really want to take the time and get that style right. So, another thing that you may not think about, but what is the builder's personality? Now, just because you have a nice personality doesn't mean you're a good builder. That it really has nothing to do with it. I guess you could say the same when you're dating someone. If someone has a great personality, that doesn't mean that person's right for you. But if you do get a builder and they're difficult to deal with, and they talk down to you, they think your questions are stupid or annoying, that might be a red flag for you. This is your house. You're paying the money for it. You have every right to do things the way you want them done, right? And so I would encourage you to get to know the builder. You're not dating them, but you're going to be in contact with them for several months at least. Typically, they're going to offer a 1 or a 2 year warranty. You're going to be in contact with them after you move in. Are they responsive? Talk to some homeowners who have been in homes for 2 years that they built. What problems have they had? How have they been resolved? Are they quick to respond, or once they have their money, are they almost impossible to get a hold of? We hear that frequently from buyers, that once we moved in, you get a hold of them, and obviously they're busy on other projects and so forth, but they don't respond to past customers. And that's a red flag, in my opinion. So you need to make sure that they take care of you before, during, and after the building process goes on. Now, some people have unrealistic expectations. We run into that with the home inspection world. You're expecting perfection, and we can do everything possible to try to be excellent, but it just doesn't meet standards. So you have to be realistic that you're dealing with humans, but they should have a professionalism about them that meets your standard. Number 4, understand your agreement. The agreement just lays out when things are going to be built, how they're going to be built, the costs associated with it. Have a lawyer go through it. A lot of these are written by lawyers. The builder probably doesn't even, maybe doesn't even read it, certainly didn't write it. And you're going to want an attorney to look through it to make sure there's no loopholes, make sure you're not left holding additional expenses after you move in, make sure there's no, liens against the builder, the property, whatever. Are they going to be annexed? Are they going to be, you're going to have to pay extra sewer fees, anything like that. You want to make sure you get taken care of ahead of time. And financing. If you're not going to pay cash for this house, you want to make sure your financing is done really well. Get it done ahead of time. Know what you're good for. What you don't want to end up is, we talked about a budget going over. So you don't want to finance for the amount of the basic level and then realize you need 20% more and you go back and you can't get it. Then you're left with an unfinished house or one that's not done very well and you're unsatisfied with it and you're going to be fighting that. Number 6, down the road, before you start and during the process and down the road, you want to communicate constantly. Some of the best people I've heard talk on this subject talk about a weekly meeting. Now, you may have a weekly meeting with your spouse to discuss finances, planning for the week, and so forth. I would suggest a weekly or bi-weekly meeting with your builder. Let's meet at the job site, 10-15 minutes. We're going to inspect the work. We're going to make sure we're on the right timeline. We're going to make sure we're on the right budget. We're going to make sure there's no overruns. We're going to make sure if there's delays, we want to know about it. You want to communicate this. Don't just assume. A builder is going to be most responsive to someone that is, well, I guess for a lack of a better word, minorly annoying, right? You don't want to be annoying personality-wise, but you want to be persistent. You want to stay on top of the process, and you want to let them know that you're watching them every step of the way, that you value their work, that you're concerned that things are going to get done right and on budget. And so if you don't, they're going to tend, just human nature, they're going to take a little more leeway with things. They may put you off when somebody else is making some noise about something. So you want to make sure you're on top of it and that you are communicating with that builder constantly. I'm not talking about being annoying. You're not texting them at 11 o'clock at night and things like that. But you want to just ahead of time, hey, we're going to meet every week. Is that going to work for you? And if he says, no, there's no way that's going to work, then you want to probably find a different builder. Another way that you can enhance your process is look for ways to save. We talked about the fact that you're probably going to have some overruns, but look for ways to save. Now, this has a little bit of a caveat. I would say don't go cheap. One thing I learned the hard way is if you go cheap, you're going to end up replacing it soon. And in the long run, you've spent more money. So you want to have quality products, but you don't want to go too far over the top, all right? Maybe if they have a plan for tile in a certain floor, you can go a different finish and maybe do it cheaper. Saving a few hundred here and there, it can go a ways depending on your budget. If you're one of those that kind of has unlimited funds and you don't really care, you just want it to look awesome, that's great. And you still need to communicate, because you don't want to spend more than you have to on any kind of building. Number 8, get an independent inspector. And this is where we would come in. Come in and, you can look at certain things. You're going to look at the finishes and things like that. You can get a home inspector that can come through, if they're qualified, to look at each part of the building process. Typically, they're going to come in and look after the footings are poured. You're going to typically have a local county commission, or not commissioner, but inspector that's going to require permits and sign off on those things. But they have a little bit different standard than maybe a home inspector does, all right? They're not looking at the same things. They're just going to follow it basically to codes of the county or city that they're in. Home inspectors look at it a different way, all right? And so I would suggest bringing one in, have them check it after the footers, after the framing, after the rough-in, all that stuff. Because the rough-in, when they have the walls up, they have the electrical boxes where they're going to go, they have the plumbing stub outs where they're going to go. At that point is really critical, because at that point, changing things is still pretty easy. And if there's a problem, if they've installed something incorrectly, if they have missed something, you're walking around like, wait a minute, we don't have any outdoor receptacles. How am I going to plug in anything? Well, that's the time to do it. Obviously, once you board things up, you put drywall up, you finish it, repairs, change orders, things like that become exceedingly more difficult. Everybody gets a little hot and bothered by that. So make sure you get an inspector in there, or go through with your blueprint, or whatever is comfortable for you. Get professional help if you need it, but be very diligent. Go room by room and making sure just everything makes sense. Maybe just sit down in the middle of the room and think about, if you're living there, what you would need, where you would plug something in, and so forth. So take your time with that and make sure that you are satisfied with where things are before they hang the drywall. And this is not just on you. If you go through and you're careless in this, and then you tell the builder it's okay, and then he puts everything up, and then later you change your mind, that's on you. And that's going to cost more, and because it takes a lot of time and effort to tear things apart and re-put them back together. So make sure you do that part and you're diligent about that. So with an independent inspector, they're checking the foundation and footings, the framing, and then lock up. Is everything done? Do we have everything done that needs done? The locks all work right. I mean, lock up sounds funny, but you got to keep people out, right? So make sure the locks are working, the doors are swinging like you want them to, the doors and windows are installed right. There's just a litany of things that you can look up. We're going to talk about that just in a little bit, about the final walkthrough, about what you're looking for in that scenario. But very important to get that done, and right before they hand it over. And finally, and this kind of goes back to the contract, but know your rights. After the fact, if something goes wrong, what are your rights? And this should be in the contract. It should be specific in there. Something goes wrong, you move in and an air conditioner hasn't been charged properly and it's not working. Or you have a large crack in your ceiling. Now this, first of all, is not terribly uncommon to have settlement cracks up to even 7 years after you move in. So if you get a settlement crack, it's not necessarily something serious, but what is your right as a homeowner? What is your right to get this fixed after you're done? So make sure you know that and adhere to that. And the builder has a responsibility to be honest and to do things right and to listen to you, but you have a responsibility to communicate and to stick with the plan that you agreed upon ahead of time. Now, another thing that I guess the house has been built, you're almost ready to close. Another thing that we want to talk about briefly is the final walkthrough. A final walkthrough, sometimes it's called a blue tape inspection. And the reason we do that, I mean, it can be blue or green, but typically painter's tape is going to be blue or green. I think they make yellow and probably make some other colors too. But painter's tape is really, it sticks, but it won't pull paint off. And that's why the painters use it on new paint, or as they are painting. And so what I'll typically see, you go through a house and you'll go through with a flashlight. You've heard the term going through this with a fine-tooth comb. You're going to go through this house, basically every lineal foot along the walls, and you're going to check for cosmetic defects. Now, a home inspector, we're not going to really look at cosmetic. We don't necessarily care about that. Even on new construction, that's not really our department. This is on you. And so you go through, you take little pieces of painter's tape. If you see a scuff in a wall or a dent or missing paint or drywall mud maybe on a baseboard, that you'll put a little piece of tape. And it's not uncommon to go through a house and see dozens of these things all over the house. And that just tells me somebody has gone through and done the final walkthrough pre-closing inspection cosmetically. And so that's something on you. And a home inspector is not going to help you with that. So you go through and You identify what needs to be fixed, and the builder a lot of times will go through with you, and then you can um, get an idea on the timeline of when they're going to fix that, and you can do a final reinspection. Now, as far as getting an inspector involved, he's going to look at the major systems of the house. We mentioned earlier that a builder will have his subs, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and so forth. And he's usually involved in various projects. He's not going to inspect every aspect of their work as they do it. So there may be some things that don't quite jive. For example, I did a new home inspection a couple of months ago, and this was a reputable builder, but I went through, and the way that the HVAC and plumbing had been put together, you could not open the plumbing, or you could not open the cover for the furnace filter to get the furnace filter out because the gas line had been run too close to the cover. It's a flap that lifted up, and it wouldn't lift up because they ran the gas line too low to go into the furnace. And so the builder was there with me when I saw that. He just put his hand in his head, or his head in his hand, I should say, and just shook his head. And you could tell he was frustrated. That didn't meet the standards of his work. But like I said, they're humans. But what are they going to do about it? Can we fix it? Well, this was something that was easily fixed and taken care of. Another thing in the same house is you run the dishwasher. A lot of times appliances get put in, but they don't really get used. They don't get tested. So you run a dishwasher through a normal cycle, excuse me, and it leaked. So in the same couple of minutes, we have a finding that we can't get the furnace filter out. Number 2, the dishwasher is leaking into the basement. And number 3, there was condensation leaking out of the blower unit on the furnace and running onto the floor. So we had 3 fairly significant things just within a small area, all on a brand new house. And so that's why you get this done. These are not earth-shattering things. It's not something that cannot be fixed. But it's an idea of those would be 3 things if you moved in without an inspection that you would be frustrated with and rely on them to fix after you've already bought the house. The same house, by the way, and this was a beautiful house, so I'm not trying to diminish it, but I'm just saying even in a beautiful house, you can have these issues going on. But the roof, there was approximately 15 to 20 shingles that were significantly damaged by foot traffic. This can happen when you put a shingle roof on in really hot weather, especially if it's a little steep. Feet on shingles, if they're rotating, they're kind of grind the granules off of that shingle. And, will it hurt anything now? Probably not, but those are the shingles that are going to deteriorate the quickest. And so you want to make sure that those shingles get replaced and they're in the new condition before you move forward with the purchase. And so those are all on one house. I think we just have a litany of things that we found with new home construction. One thing that we have found is in times of shortages, like with builders, shortage of builders, a shortage of help, and there's a demand for new houses, we'll find people that have spent most of their life doing remodeling, and they think, hey, why don't I just build a house? And so they might be skilled at certain aspects of remodeling, but start to finish building a house is a different game. And so probably some of the most eye-opening inspections we've done where you show up to a new house and you're expecting this inspection to be, quote, relatively easy. And that's the kiss of death when you think that, because it's just, you can usually tell right away, this guy was substandard, he was inexperienced, he's probably a hard worker, he's doing his best, but it's just not the skill set you need to make a house look great, to build it like you're supposed to, and go for it. Go for pristine quality in all the areas. So one thing to look at, another thing to look at on a house is the exterior. Now, when we do a home inspection on any house, exterior-wise, one of the biggest things we're looking at is grading and drainage. This is typically the top defect on a house. Now, especially if you have a basement, grading and drainage is crucial. If you have a patio that is not sloped away from the house, or sidewalks that have already settled and now water runs down and runs right toward your basement wall and sits against it. All it takes is a small crack in that wall for water to seep in with water pooling against it. So obviously you're supposed to have drainage tile and things like that, but depending on the type of soil you have, it still may sit there and pool and seep in. So when you're around the outside, you want to make sure that that final grading has been done properly, that you have clear evidence that concrete hard surfaces slope away. One of the popular things over the years has been, let's mound up the landscaping because this looks attractive for some reason, but it also creates a negative slope of water runoff right toward a foundation wall. So you don't want to have that. And so that's a critical aspect. Don't ignore the exterior of the house. Make sure that the siding, if you have vinyl siding, make sure that it's put on like it should be. And this is where you may need to bring in a home inspector. Okay, this is probably beyond or before the final walkthrough stage. But how's that vinyl siding been attached? Is it tight enough or is it too tight? If it's too tight, it's going to warp. It'll stay on, but it's going to be wavy, especially as the sun hits it, especially with darker colors, and really stand out and not look attractive over time. There's sometimes it's like that car you buy, that used car. It works great for about 3 months. And then all of a sudden you got lights coming on, you got things breaking down, and you're like, yeah, I kind of got taken by this used car dealer. He made things look good long enough until I got away from him. Same thing can happen on a house. So make sure that you're getting a professional to look at the major components of the house inside and outside. So one other thing to think about when you're inside is doors. Do you have the doors where you want them? Obviously, at the final walkthrough stage, it's a little hard to move them. But when they open and shut, are they hitting on the frame? Do they have the right kind of gap around the whole frame? That's what you want to look for. Otherwise, they've been put in poorly. You're going to struggle with that door probably until it gets fixed. And so you want to make sure that's done. Do the windows open and close easily? This is something you can do, but you should be able to open and close a window with one hand. Okay, obviously the crank out, the casement style, you want those to open all the way and come, when they're brand new, they ought to open all the way and come all the way back in with no assistance outside or anything else. So you want to make sure that happens. Now, the quality of your windows will affect that, but regardless, they need to be put in so they're not binding in the frame. If you got windows binding in the frame and difficult to open on a new house, something wasn't put in right, and that could indicate even deeper problems with that builder or whoever did the windows. So check out the floors and stairs. Are your stairs squeaky? If you have squeaky floors and stairs that squeak with each step, ask me how I know this. Somebody else built this house, the house that I built. That's going to be something that's frustrating to you the whole time because especially after you have floor finishes down, it's really hard to fix that. It's possible, but it's more involved than beforehand and so forth. We talked about some of the cosmetics and, of course, the area that you spend a lot of time in, your kitchen. All right? Your kitchen is crucial. You're going to spend, depending on what kind of family you have and kids around, you're going to spend a great deal of time in that kitchen. Make sure all the appliances work. Make sure the dishwasher is secure in the opening. The door opens and closes properly. It doesn't hit on a frame. Make sure it actually drains. Make sure it doesn't leak. Runs through the cycle, pumps out, and has been installed right. And so that's a big thing because, appliances can be frustrating. They can be expensive if they don't work right, but you need to make sure you got new ones. They should be working. If you go into this final walkthrough and you still have stickers on the doors, you still have packing materials in the dishwasher and oven and refrigerator, you can be sure that they didn't really put these things through a test. Because if they do, that stuff would have melted or washed off or something. And so make sure you run everything in the way that you would normally operate it. So these are some things, just in closing, I guess, probably the number one thing we find on new home construction or maybe a flipped house, something that's had some newer work done, is plumbing related issues. Typically electrical, if the person is competent, you're going to have a pretty good um, time you've tested the outlets and the switches and everything. You can have a pretty good idea of what kind of electrician you had in there. Plumber is a little more hard to detect because almost all of us behind walls. You run the faucets, they may run the faucets. But with a lot of, especially maybe more complicated shower valves and stuff, you can put those in wrong and you'll get water out of it, but it might not be the temperature that you want. And so you need to get somebody that's qualified to go in there, check all the fixtures, make sure they're vented properly, make sure there's not leaks under sinks, make sure you don't have a shower drain that leaks into the ceiling below. It's something you may not know until you've filled it up or used it for the first or second time. Because there's a difference between running water for a few minutes and actually standing in that tub or that shower with your weight on that drain and running it for an extended period of time. So a lot of things can happen in plumbing. We find a lot of plumbing related issues in all kinds of houses. This is something that you want to make sure you're not dealing with after you move in. So I know I've rambled on for quite a while, but these are some things that you just want to think about before you first buy a house. Second, if you're buying or building or buying a new house, things to look at regarding the inspection part of it, the final walkthrough, the interview beforehand. Don't be afraid to ask those tough questions. Don't be afraid of offending your builder. Don't be afraid of doing any of that, because once you close, that's yours. And you need to be aware of that and take all the precautions beforehand. So thanks so much for listening today. Please like and share this podcast. You are our best advertising. And if you like this, if you got some value from it, we'd appreciate you sharing it. Tune in next time, and we appreciate you listening.